we will go ahead and get started, and I have given you guys a packet there to follow through again. I believe we have everything in order of sequence that we'll roll through here. First of all is approving the minutes from 3-4 from last week. If you want to look through those, and we'll take a motion to accept those.
Motion to accept the minutes from the meeting on 3/4/2022.
Second. All right, great. And since Megan's not here, we got our trustee Adam here. And so if I just have you go sign that we have approved. I'm just trying to keep in good standing with Megan. I can deal with Adam.
Important.
I can deal with Adam. Yeah. That's if I'm not in good standing with Megan, that I'm in trouble. So, thank you very much. So in your packet then, after the minutes that you have, is I went ahead and one of our discussions we talked about one of our previous meetings was about kind of the timeline, how we want to handle policies that come our way. And so we talked about, we work backwards. And so if you take a look at that handout, that's kind of the timelines that we'll follow, that we would need to have things 2 weeks in advance. That way I can do follow-up, we can ask questions, we can make phone calls, and then we can make the edits and then push it out a week in advance. And then you guys would have time to review all those before the meeting, and then we can go from there. So I think that's what I'll go ahead and I will send out to everybody after this meeting, as this is kind of so they can kind of see the exact dates we got there. So that way, if, like say for June, we don't get anything by June 17th, there won't be a July policy meeting.
Thank you for doing that.
So that's all there, it's all scripted out, that way all the board members kind of know, kind of try to adhere to that timeline so we can kind of handle things as we go through those. Then that leads us to our considerations.
Sorry.
Yes.
So if we don't get something in this timeline, will we just defer it to the next meeting? That will be our practice.
Correct, that'll be the practice, unless we hear it's something of the utmost importance and timeline. The only thing I think of, for example, graduation.
Okay.
Because I think, if something happens at the State House, they say, hey, you need to accept this graduation waiver, like we've done the past couple of years with COVID, which those are all in place now. But I'm just using that as an example. If it would come out, the end of April, and we're graduating kids in May, it's like, well, we don't have a policy for that yet. We'll do that in June after graduation's over. We can't do that. So it's one of those rare exceptions. Correct. That's just an example where we would kind of go against that.
Okay, so basically we need to communicate after each policy meeting. We have about 2 weeks window to come up with any additional policies that need edited, and then that will start the process within 2 weeks.
But not even just the policies, like I think the edits themselves need to be there as well, because again, like I know you sent out an edit yesterday with less than 24 hours of this meeting. That's really hard for somebody else to respond to. So I think even not just, my understanding would be not just the policies, but any edits.
Any edits, so they can be changed, so people have time to read and go from there. Once again, no, unless it's of significant timeline importance.
I really do have some concern with that, but maybe it's just because I'm unaware of the process and unfamiliar with the process, because I feel like 2 weeks is a long time for something to possibly happen. But that's just my concern. So I'm unaware of really.
Right, and if something comes up, we would definitely catch it then on the next policy meeting.
Right, but then that leaves it like a month.
Yeah.
That just slows things down a little bit, but I guess that is the case. But
yeah, and if you look on the agenda, you'll see there's a lot of months where we don't have policy meetings.
Right.
Because it just doesn't pop up that often. We know that for sure. We'll probably have 2 every year for sure, because the Neola usually gives a winter update and a fall update. So you're at least going to have 2. And then the other meetings that come up, those could be carryovers or things that have popped up as we work through things and we see that we need to revisit a policy or something like that. So a lot of times it's, I know what you're saying, but the timeline is rare.
And you don't feel like, as far as someone that deals with policy, that it is going to slow or negatively affect things in a dramatic manner?
No, because when you're usually up against some things with timeline, it's usually for down the road what you have to put in. It's not like it has to be put in right now. Some of this kind of language changes as we move forward. not like it needs to be done today. If that happens, then that's when we would do the exception to the rule. And
Just like anything else.
I'm trying to think,
We'll fix it.
and we've talked about it before about, and I want to say there's maybe one time in the past couple of years where we did a first read and then it was approved that same night, just because we had to get it done. I think that's only happened once or twice since I've been trying to help organize this for the past 9 years or so. So it's not frequent.
Okay.
So if that helps.
I just want to make sure it's not hurtful.
Yeah, no, I think we're good. And if we come up against that point where, hey, this is one where we need to pick it up, we can look at, I think just like we did today, adding another meeting and getting it in and trying to figure out what that looks like to help the district continue to move forward. So then we have the 3 that were first reads back on the 14th that were kind of kicked back as kind of some recommendations. And as I emailed you, I went back and I watched the video. And I went through each policy, kind of that discussion that took place and kind of the comments that were made by all board members and try to condense those down into, this is what I heard, this is what I believe is the majority of what we're saying. And so I made corrections or updated edits, and what I'll do is I'll just walk you through those changes, because if I don't talk about it, it's the same it was on the first read. And then I'll just kind of walk you through there. So
Before we start there, can I read something in the record real fast?
sure.
Okay. So regarding my response to the policy committee regarding communication and preparation for the policy meeting scheduled for today, March 11th, 2022, I have brought to the board and the committee's attention on numerous occasions the serious liability that I believe is posed to the district by ignoring the credible information that suggests fundamental flaws in our COVID policies. Specifically, policies 5200, the November 29th, 2021 amendments, and 845001. I request again that we do the following regarding health authorities, regarding masks and other COVID policies, 5200 November 29th, 2021 amendments, and policy 8405.01. Was written assurances of legal support, what written assurances of legal support do we have from the health department to protect us if or when we are sued for requiring and or promoting the use of masks or any of the other COVID-19 restrictions, mandates, promotions, advocacies, or guidelines under the advisement or directives from the health department when we are acutely aware of the considerable amount of credible information that says masks are of little to no help in reducing the spread of COVID-19, that vaccines do not provide protection from contracting COVID-19, and that testing is unreliable, as well as the considerable amount of information that warns of the serious health risks associated with the regular use of masks, the side effects of vaccines, including death, the societal problems of lockdowns and quarantines, including domestic violence and emotional distress, especially with children. These questions have never been posed to the health department to my knowledge. With this in mind, I think it is appropriate that we request written confirmation of legal support from the relevant health authorities. Draft communication. This is the draft communications that we would like, where I would like, please forward writings that detail what legal support the Lakota School District can expect from the health department in the event we are sued for either requiring or promoting the use of masks, promoting or requiring COVID-19 tests, promoting or requiring quarantine, promoting or requiring vaccinations at the behest or advisement of the health department. For legal, why is legal not being asked to assure us that the scenario described here with COVID-19 policies pose no legal liabilities? The draft communication for legal looks like, does the fact that we have information from historically credible and reliable sources advising that cloth masks or medical masks are of little to no help in stopping the spread of COVID-19 virus, as well as information warning of the serious health risks associated with the regular use of these masks, especially to children, the serious health risks associated with vaccinations, especially in healthy children, and the fact that they do not stop contraction of the virus, as well as the negative effects of being subjected to the kinds of isolation that comes from being locked down or quarantined, pose no legal liability to the district when we continue to promote or require their use. Is this a non-issue in the eyes of our legal advisors? For insurance, regarding liability insurance as it relates to the enforcement of the district's COVID-19 policies, Our insurance provider should ask to weigh in after we have heard from the health department and the legal. Once we understand whether or not the health department will back us legally, and whether or not we have legal advice that, one, acknowledges that we possess information from historically credible sources that strongly suggests that we may be constructing and enforcing policies that have the potential to harm the health of those affected by them, but two, advises the board regarding any associated legal liabilities to the district, we can act accordingly regarding to our insurance providers. Thank you.
Yeah, when I saw this, my question is on the 5200, what specifically update in November 5200 are you concerned with health-wise?
Well, there has just been updates since COVID has started, so we just need to take away those updates. And
Well-
revert back to the prior 5200 before November 29th, 2020.
Okay, so the updates in the 5200 talk about college visitation. The district requires verification of the date and time of visitation by college or university.
So quarantining in there.
No. Absences to a student placement in foster care. Absences to a student being homeless. And then the only other update on that November one is the district having attendance for remote learning plan.
Okay,
So
we'll get back to you on that one.
yeah, because I don't see, and that is part of Ohio Revised Code 2151, that we had to take those. I didn't see anything about masking or quarantine that we added in November for attendance. And
Okay.
6200 just deals with taking attendance.
Right, let me get back to you on that one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. And then I think Matt got an email back from legal a couple weeks ago.
That was the March 4th email.
But my concern is the questions are not how I'm pointing them out here. So I would like to present these questions that I am specifically writing for you.
Yeah, how are they different? I'm just trying to answer your question.
Did you not read it?
I read it and I was just listening to you.
And did you ask, I bolded it for you. So did you ask specifically that is the exact question?
Did you see the email that I
For
sent
legal.
on March 4th?
Yes, I did.
With the
But
attachment?
did you ask that exact question?
Okay. If you read the email in the attachment on March 4th, it's responding to your questions. I don't think there's anything in there that they're not addressing. And then I put in that email again, and if you have a further question, to contact the attorney that the board contracts with for any other follow-up. It's in there. There's also the insurance piece that's in there that I also emailed to you as well. I can read
But one
all of
could
that, but
say,
I'm not gonna
yeah,
provide sound bites.
but one could say that possibly you asking the question versus me, you could ask it in a slanted manner. And when you ask a
So could
question. Well, I'm not, you can clearly see that. So your question being asked versus my question, they're gonna give you the answer that you want, is what someone would potentially argue.
Okay, I forwarded your concerns on to the attorney, and those were his response.
Yeah.
I forwarded what you sent me
I would
to
like those
ask
questions.
the attorney,
Yeah.
and that's what I gave you. So I didn't slant anything, I didn't twist anything. I don't appreciate the comment that I did, because I didn't, and I forwarded to you more than once the attorney's response that covers everything that you just read that we already had.
I would just like these specific questions asked.
So they're already answered. But if there's still a question you have, contact Prosper and Todd and talk to Mr. Schaller, and he'll get back to you on that. I mean, I'm not trying to be evasive. We're addressing it, and we are hitting that legally all the time. I don't know.
Yeah,
Do you have the same concerns?
No, and again, I feel like we've gotten multiple answers now from legal, and you just said if you want to contact them directly to ask that same question again and pay additional legal fees for the same question, as I feel like you've answered. To me, you spoke about the liability of adhering to the rules, and I feel like we've been told the liability, there isn't case law on this yet, because people haven't been
That was
sued.
in his response.
So you can't say definitively 100% how somebody's going to rule, but they said that we were covered if we follow the directives that we've been given. if we go rogue and do our own thing, I have much greater concern of the legal liability to the district when we're not following current orders or laws or accepted practices by our local healthcare providers and professionals who we consult with. So I don't share that same concern in how we're moving forward. So,
But no, many schools are actually,
you had mentioned that. What
Yeah.
schools in Ohio are disregarding the health orders?
they're not disregarding, they're choosing to take their students' health into their own hands.
So what schools are choosing to
So-
take their students' health into their own hands?
And that would be a good question to follow up. I mean, I know, obviously, what schools are doing this, but, anyway.
Then will you share those with us? So
Yes, I
we can
will.
ask questions of those schools?
And
Sorry, is
so,
anything that, just so I understand, is there anything that you read this morning different than the email?
No.
Okay, I just wanna make sure that
Yeah.
I didn't miss anything when you were verbalizing.
that's why I sent it to you all. And so regarding this, I mean, I again ask that you ask the school the specific questions.
Okay, so they've already been answered by legal. I CC'd the attorney that wrote the opinion, all my response back to you, and said that if you have any further questions, to contact him. So he sees what the questions are. My guess is he's really good, and if there's anything that he missed, that he will review it and respond to the full board with any answers.
So you did send this forward.
Yes, that was the response. I sent it to him again.
No, I just sent this to you last night, so you didn't send these exact questions.
Yes, ma'am, I did. I just did this morning.
Right, this morning, okay, but then you said you sent it again.
Correct, I sent it again. He has it more than once.
So you just got these last night, so you sent it more than once?
I sent it last night, I sent it today.
Well, and it's very similar
After
to the
your
questions
response.
from earlier in
Right.
the month. Like I didn't, again, when I read what we got from you yesterday, I didn't see that there were legal questions that were raised that were different. Again, it sounds like you think that they were. So what do you think the difference is between the last email that had questions go to the attorney and this email? What legal question was different?
Because this form is a little bit different. I just would like to see the questions that you asked, please. Can you send me those?
You were copied on.
Okay. All right, I'll review those.
They're the ones that you sent me.
But they weren't these exact questions. You wouldn't, okay, I'm not gonna go into this. All right, if you're refusing to do this, so be it.
Oh,
He said he did.
I didn't refuse it. No, I sent it twice. What am I refusing to do, ma'am? What am I refusing to do?
Okay, we'll just move on.
No, you made an accusation, I'd like a response.
Well, you're still arguing with it.
I've
let's just
done
move on with
everything, I have done
conversation.
everything that you've asked me to do.
Right.
I've done this more than once.
Okay.
We're getting billed more than once.
Yeah.
He responded. He'll respond again if it's anything different than what he already gave. I'm sorry that you think I'm being difficult, I'm just answering your questions again. That's why I asked you if what you shared this morning was any different than the email you already gave us.
All right, again, so let's move on. I think I'm done here. Thank you.
All right, so I went back, I watched the video, I went through the timelines. I believe I sent those to you guys for the end of February or whatever. And so if you take a look at 0169.1, there have been 2 changes since the first read. Okay, there's just 2 changes. So what you see in front of you, exactly what you saw for first read when it was presented to the board on 14th, except for 2 areas. The first area is letter D at the top of the second page. This is the conversation we had about if others physically are not able to sign themselves in. We added the sentence that says if you are physically unable, you can designate someone to sign yourself in for that comment. So that's the first difference. And then the second difference is down in letter G. Because Isaac had said at the board meeting he would get clarification on this, and so this is what he sent for letter G that says no participant may speak more than once, and added during each public comment section on the agenda. So those are the only two changes from the first read from the 14th. So are there any questions about those two changes, or because as I went through, I know there was concern about changing letter B, and as I mentioned in my notes, it was 3-2 in favor of keeping it as is. I know that Mrs. Bodie and Mr. D wanted to open it up, but the other three wanted to keep it limited to those listing there, so I didn't make any changes there.
Can I ask
I think that was
why we are restricting comments from people who are outside of Lakota when we accept federal tax dollars?
I asked an attorney about that, and it doesn't apply. It's just local,
Who said it doesn't apply?
the leaders.
I mean, I just don't understand why would we, and I think we have the option to say that it does apply to us. And why would we choose now to restrict participation at the board? Like, who benefits from that?
That's the way, it's not a new restriction, that's how we're actually expanding because we caught the part of a parent or legal resident of a currently enrolled student now being added. So I think that was a good catch that we didn't have on the policy previously. But this is standard for, these are the people who have an interest, the predominant interest in your local public schools. And this is how most schools allow for public participation at their board meetings, which again, it is a business meeting of which the public is invited to participate. But that's not even a legal requirement to have anybody participate at our meeting. So when you talk about that it's a requirement because they're federal taxpayers, it's not a requirement for us to have anybody speak at our meeting.
Well, you do realize, before Isaac and I were elected, that you and Brad Lovell changed designee from the policy, and that there was a designee before that. So before that, they
just Brad and I, the board voted on that.
we did allow designees, and that's what I'm wanting to add back again. And and I think that's fair to add that.
Understood, but a majority of the board at the last meeting discussed this and did not agree, so I think we can all agree.
I do not agree on that one.
Understood.
Anyone who is a resident or business owner within the district boundaries may participate during the designated public participation. I believe that we should add designate.
Any concern with G? That was kind of Isaac's thing.
No concern there.
Yeah, my one thought would be is if we don't have time, if there's a way to give people the opportunity to speak if it's their first time prior to those who are speaking for the second time, but I mean, again, it's not, I know I'm gonna Diane, so that's just something to consider from a practical standpoint.
All right, then moving on to our next, so this will go up for second read as it's seen in front of you today. The next one, 2210, the only thing that I saw came up for discussion was basically the first paragraph that goes into curriculum shall be defined as. I went back to Neil and I said, hey, can I see the template language for the options for that? Because we had selected 3 of them, and the question that came up at the board meeting that I heard was wanting to review what the possibilities could be for that definition.
Yes.
And so in front of you is the template definition that was selected, and I have to look back, I guess, back in 2014. But those are the options. So the previous policy committee selected those 3 options, which are also part of the 6 options. And so I just throw it open to both of you if that is something you want to go beyond the current 3 that are listed, if we want to add or change the ones that were selected. And then the second page, I kind of heard that as kind of 4-1 in favor of keeping the language edit on page 2 as presented. So I guess we'll go ahead and take a look at the first 6 options. Are you comfortable keeping the 3? Do you want to change the 3? Do you want to add to the 3? I guess we kind of got a cornucopia of choices here.
Mm-hmm. I would be most comfortable with AMC, which are the course of studies, subjects, classes, and organizational activities provided by the school and the plan for learning necessary to accomplish the educational goals of the district.
I mean, I'm fine with A through F. I mean, it's not, I don't think, I don't believe that the intent is to really specifically dive into everything and micromanage every single little thing, but it would be great to have the availability and the transparency to look at things that we are specifically interested in, whatever it may be at any certain time.
Well, we have that without, I think, going into all of this here, because we've been, and has been requested specific situations. And I don't think that any of us are going to have the expertise or to go through stacks of curricular material. And if it says that we're responsible for it, that would be the expectation. I think if we leave that to our curriculum folks who are trained in that area, and then to bring us that high level overview for approval, to me seems more appropriate for our level. And then if there are specific instances, then we can do specific situations. But I don't want to get into a situation where because a specific item wasn't approved, the teacher can't then revise their lesson plan throughout the year to say, okay, my students are taking an interest in this area, in this direction. You know, I want to follow that and pursue that, and that wasn't approved by whatever, July 1st or whenever we're going to be approving this. So therefore, I can't instruct my students to the best of my ability. I'm sure with homeschooling, you've done that, where you followed somebody's interest and pattern to provide the curriculum while still being able to pursue individual passions. So I think if we keep this to me, at a higher level with A and C, then that still gives our staff the flexibility to accomplish what they need to accomplish.
And we can ask the rest of the board members and see what they think on that.
So you want to keep it as it is, and then in the meeting,
Yep.
those will be selected.
Yes. On the next page, the superintendent shall seek board approval for curriculum. I mean, the proposed policy changes that the superintendent currently has authority over curriculum that is either comparable or supersedes that of the boards, and the board's existing authority regarding curriculum is preeminent and comprehensive. Although this addition gives the appearance of change, it is technically redundant in the grand scheme of policies that could already be considered voluminous. It would only add confusion. I mean, it already says this several times in the.
So you want to delete that and just not even put it in there?
I mean, it already says it in policies 331317, 3313.20, 331321, 331347, 0118, 1100, and 0171.2. I mean, you can add it in there, but it already is in our the ORC 1, 2, 3, 4 times in our policies. It already says it 3 times, so it's redundant.
And sometimes there's a lot of policies that are very redundant. As you know, when we met with Norm, you've got the dress code policy for administrative, for classified, for professional, and for students. Sometimes it is very repetitive, so it's not uncommon, but I hear what you're saying. So we just keep it in there then, I guess.
Wasn't that what the majority had said in the last meeting?
Yeah.
So I think they were where we stood after the last.
And then for the second sentence, this addition would effectively bar a duly elected member of the Board of Education from discreetly and spontaneously observing classroom activities and assignments. I submit that there is no way to understand what is being taught in our classrooms without the consistent, discreet, spontaneous observations of classroom activities and assignments. The Lakota School Board is empowered and obligated to make honest and forthright representations to the community on all matters concerning the district, especially when it comes to what's actually being taught. And, you know, with that, there's no way for the school board as a whole to consistently and discreetly and spontaneously observe classroom activities and assignments that would be ineffective in every way, as well as being a profound disruption. A board that would adopt this policy edition has either no intentions of making observations in this manner, or somehow imagines 5 members of the board walking around in a block attempting to be discreet as if they could possibly observe candid activities in this manner. The thought of this is ludicrous to a reasonable person.
What's
So
your
this-
intent behind this screen?
I mean, we are responsible for what is being taught in the classroom. And discreet, I don't know if you all are like picturing that I walk in there like, hey, can I have this assignment, please? This looks suspicious. I mean, that's not, I think it's something more like, oh, hey, that's really interesting. I really like that. Can I take a look at that assignment?
So you want to observe teachers?
No, it's assignments. How are we knowing what's being
I
taught?
thought that your word that you just read off, that you said something about observing.
Discreetly, spontaneously observing classroom activities and assignments.
So yes, observe.
Yes, classroom activities and assignments.
Okay. School board members don't observe teachers. That's not your
Well,
purview.
how are we supposed to know what's being taught in our schools?
By everything else in that policy and then some. What problem are you trying to solve? Whenever we make a policy change, that's one of the things that Norm or before Norm, whoever else from you, what we always talked about, what problem are we trying to solve? What problem are you trying to solve?
So basically, the community is concerned with what is being taught in our schools. And I was elected to see what is being taught in our schools as a board member.
Right, you swore an oath when you became a board member. It wasn't based on a platform or the election piece. You swore an oath to the Constitution to uphold the rules and guidelines of being a board member. Observing teachers in classrooms for evaluatory purposes, discreet doesn't sound right to me. That's mentioned in there a couple times. Again, if you came to me and said, Matt, here's the problem, here's the issue, that's something that myself, the team can work on and say, okay, Darby brought up a problem, I agree with her, let's figure out what's going on and what's happening. But I don't have the problem yet. I need to know what problem you're trying to solve.
And this doesn't preclude any classroom, like if there's something that needs to be looked at, this doesn't preclude that. This simply says that you need to notify the superintendent. Again, I think from a management perspective, if he's not aware of individual problems, then he can't act on them. None of us individually have the power to make decisions and make unilateral changes. So if he's aware of each board member's concerns, can pull those together, then the board as a whole can discuss something and make decisions. So it's not a unilateral decision.
I think if this addition is passed, it will be ill-advised and egregious act on part of the board and disrespectful slap in the face to the parents, as well as an eviction of the duty to be able to communicate to the community as an informed, forthright governing body.
There are already policies in place. If a parent has an issue about what's being taught in the classroom, there are already at least 3 policies that I can't rattle off, but
Conflict resolution, I printed one of them off here.
that already exists. There already exists a pathway for any parents that are concerned. Aside from just picking up the phone and calling the teacher, or emailing the teacher, and or principal, and or curriculum department, and or myself, when there's an issue. We've had those conversations. We have those conversations with parents all the time, and often they're right, and then we make amendments and fix things. Or it's a miscommunication, or it's. But there's not, when you talk about the community, I don't have a line out the door of this building with issues. I'm not saying there aren't any, because there are. When you have this many people, and we're in the people business, when you have this many people, there are things that come up. But as they come up, we try to manage those, always at the lowest level, every single day.
What is wrong with being transparent?
I'm being very transparent, that's what I'm just saying. I think it's a lot better being transparent than discreet.
Well, I mean, discreet as in the fact that we do not want to interrupt the classroom. We do not want to
If you
interrupt.
don't think a board member walking into a classroom
Into a school building.
interrupts the teaching process, I would disagree with you.
Well, and we also
That's already happened.
we have policy 148.1, board staff
We've already had that
communications.
happen.
When you and I were walking.
Yeah.
Well, they knew we were going to be there. I mean, seriously, y'all are making this a lot harder than it really is.
I'm trying to solve problems, and you have a problem.
No, you're not. You're blocking a transparency, and you're blocking.
I disagree.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll just move on.
Okay, so
Wait, so the first sentence there, the superintendent shall seek board approval for curriculum, you're saying that's redundant and unnecessary?
I mean, it says it. I mean, many times in our policies and bylaws.
I would be fine with removing that sentence too, so I don't know if that's something that we want to remove prior to.
I mean,
The
the committee believes it should, because they can always slap it on for at the end of your second read before you vote.
Okay.
Similar to like what you're gonna do with 2210, but what I'll do is I'll put it up without it on there.
Okay.
So,
So, to confirm, an individual board member's request to view classroom-specific material. So you are just saying that a member cannot go into a classroom specifically and ask for assignment.
Correct.
Or that's not what you're saying.
No, that's not all, you can't just go individually into a classroom as a board member. We need to run those class visits and school visits through the superintendent.
in my own experience of now having kids that have been in the district for 14 years, and in my current position, I intentionally stay away from the classrooms and buildings my kids are in, because I don't want to give the impression that I'm going in to find something. And I tell that with them. I tell them, I say, when I meet with them for conferences, I say, I just want you to see something. And I literally do this, so they know that I'm Rob the dad right now. I'm not the assistant superintendent, because when I do walk in the building, it is kind of, even though I'm the assistant superintendent, it's kind of like, and it's just, I see that. And so I intentionally tell people, I stay with, because right or wrong, that is the feeling that people have even when I walk in the building. I'm just giving you my lens on kind of how I try and help that, but I know that's the view sometimes, right or wrong. So,
I know I'm repeating myself, but if we have a problem, we'll look into it, we'll check it out, but we need to know what it is. We need something tangible and say, this is okay or this isn't okay. That's what we do.
But
I mean,
it's
we're.
not working. It's not working for the community. That's why I was voted in.
Who's not, where is it not working? Can you give me an example of where it's not working?
Where's it not working? So the Board of Education shall have the management control of all public records. It says that in 3313. Shall have management and control of all public records. The Board of Education of each school district shall be a body, politic, and corporate of such, of being sued, of suing. So we are liable for what's being taught in our classrooms. If we cannot see what's being taught in the classrooms, if we cannot see what is the environment in the school system, we are liable for that and we can be sued. And so I think it is for transparency, which is what the community is. I don't know where people have been for the past 2 years when people have been getting up there and parents have been speaking about the fact that they want transparency in the school district. I'm not sure where people have been with that.
People that have come up to the mic during board meetings either met with myself, Mr. Coney, or another member of the curriculum team or principal. And that's not to say that all the problems have been solved, because sometimes you're not going to agree on everything. But those people that were parents that had an issue with something going on in school, we've investigated, or we've talked to, or we've rectified or cleaned up or whatever else, and it doesn't happen a lot. It really doesn't. But when it does, we do our best to solve it. That's what we do. There's a problem, let us know and we'll check it out. We had 225 educators from around the country in 6 of our schools yesterday raving about Lakota and how we are a hallmark district. And so the positives that our kids are doing and that our teachers every single day was amplified. I'll be glad to share that with the board later. But there are so many good things going on. Are we perfect? No, no one is. And we're never going to be done. It's always an evolution. It's always a process. But again, if a parent has a problem with something that their son or daughter is doing, bring it to us.
Well,
And we'll work it out.
many of those parents who've spoken at the mic, I know I've had parents come back to me afterwards and say, once I had further conversation, I understood better, and again, parts of it I may not have liked, but I understood and agreed and realized that what was presented to me was this side, but then I didn't realize there was this balance on the other side because that's part of the requirement. And again, if we don't have somebody who's helping to harness that, we're not going to see those commonalities and not be able to get that information out to the entire board versus just one board member.
This is a matter of trust, and I think the parents see that there are concerning matters in the curriculum, and
What are they?
we can't put you as the gatekeeper. That's just ridiculous.
What are they?
Again, I am relying on your definition that I've asked through email of critical race theory and SEL and those specific curriculums. And as I am learning, there's so much more that is involved that I just need to understand what your understanding of critical race theory is. I asked you in an email to please give it to me. So I'm waiting on that.
Conversation with you, I'm not sure how that.
I'm waiting on that in writing.
I would like our problems that you're hearing about to me in writing.
And I would like your definition in writing, and then I can understand where we need to go from there.
You know what, we're going to put your problems in writing. Just tell me what they are, and then we'll work on them. If you're getting a parent call you, email you, stop you at Kroger's, just let me know so we can fix it. Whether it's CRT or something else.
All right, so we're gonna make the deletion on page 2, and board meeting will determine which of the 6 options for definition. So, then that brings us to our final policy that was up for first read and will be up for second read. This one, there's quite a few changes from the first read, and I'll kind of walk you through those page by page. Kind of where we were at. As we know, this one was changed the day of the board meeting, so there was not a lot of time to review. So on page 1, what I see the only changes from first read to what's in front of you is the paragraph at the bottom, the addition of the term by law and no exemption. Those are the only 2 changes from that paragraph down there that are different from what was presented for first read.
There's no acknowledgement and consideration of the amount of research that says masks do anything but offer meaningful protection against the coronavirus, and no acknowledgement of the considerable amount of information that points out that the serious potential health risks involved with regular use, including mental health, lower IQs, tooth decay, gum disease, bacterial pneumonia, and much more. I mean, it's not even listing those in here. At the same time, the board is clearing with this policy that masks may be important because they can help mitigate risk. A board that believes this is to be true, a board that believes this to be true would and should demand the use of masks on a regular basis, even when flu season comes, or there's a cold outbreak, but certainly anytime the health department suggests it. And any other actions would easily be deemed irresponsible and reckless when you believe that is such a straightforward protection and no health risks.
And I think that the language at the bottom just talking about when it's a law. That's it. We're not getting into whether we will or not, but when it's a law, then obviously we can't make exceptions. We can't trump the law on that one. We can't just overturn it and do what we want to do. So I think that's why that was added in there.
And we determined an order has the weight of the law, so when it says law, that
It's
includes
the
the
same
order.
thing. Executive order is the same, is considered the same as a law. Just a law has to go through the houses and legislation. When it's in order, the House and legislature can't overturn it. That's the power given to the president or the governor. Page 2, just about everything on page 2 got crossed out. A through D at the top was deleted. The paragraph right under it was deleted. The section in black type is the only thing that remains on that page from the first read. Everything else was removed. So it's just a matter of getting rid of all those definitions, one-offs, and what they are. Then on to page 3. On the top of page 3, letter M is removed and the line under that is removed. What was added is letter N, basically saying student mass exemptions will be honored in all Lakota school facilities. And then the part that was added is with the exception of OHSAA requirements. So the only thing that was added on that sentence is the with the exception of OHSAA requirements. And then as you go down, the deleted paragraph was already deleted. Use of face shields has been deleted down to the point where it's in black. So everything that is in red basically was not read on the first read, except for a couple paragraphs on the first page and a paragraph in the middle of page 3. So since then, the follow-up that was done was to go ahead and remove those other things in which, as was shared, that this is legally okay now. But I think there could still be some questions about practically how would an administrator interpret some of this, and it would come down to the board would have to say, we're either following the law, and then any recommendations or suggestions from the health department, we would just dismiss and do what we feel the board would decide what needs to happen from that point on. So currently, the mass estate test of play, if that was given as an option, this is basically saying the board will determine if we're going to take that option or not. And if we did take the option, exemptions would be allowed to be used. If it's a law or an order, then we'll follow the law of the order as it's written.
The resolution that I have been bringing to the board is designed to be a simple move to address the inordinate amount of confusing and contradictory language that makes up the COVID-19 policies that have been adopted over the last 18 months. These policies and proposed additions cumulatively allow the guidelines and required behavior to be imposed on anyone on the school property and can in turn expose the district to unnecessarily liability. Additionally, and may be paramount, was the support documents that should necessarily be made available to the community and the parents in the district to give them a clear understanding of the kinds of information that is available to them in order to make an informed decision about their children and their own health. You can find these you can request these documents as well.
Again, I still am concerned about ignoring as I've said before, ignoring the health department recommendations. And that even though legally we can, that from a practical standpoint, that doesn't seem wise to me because we're standing on our own instead of following the health experts. We keep talking about experts. I consider the Ohio Department of Health and the Butler County Health authorities experts in the field of pandemics and endemics versus some other sources of information. So I would, again, I think this is what others, I don't know who made the most recent request to strike all of this wording, but I find it confusing that we say that we're going to follow what's covered by law, but then anyone can have read this and follow this. But I think, again, we may have to just bring it forward without agreeing, because I don't think we're going to come to agreement on this, because we're obviously on different sides of this particular issue. So rather than continuing to discuss this here, I think it might make sense to. But I guess for the striking, who made those strikes and how does that process work? So anyone can make the strike in between the two reads?
Yeah, I guess it came from, it was presented at a agenda setting as kind of the follow-up, I think maybe from Isaac or Linda. And so when they went back to try and clean it up, to offer some, try to clarify maybe a little bit. So this was their attempt to try and clarify what they were hoping to see in the policy. So.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, it's confusing
So I think what I hear you say is, and I know you want to rescind it, and
Yep.
And so, but we're gonna put it up as this, so then the board can have that discussion of, I don't agree with this, and voting no, or voting to rescind, or just finding it as unnecessary. So,
and my resolution will be on the agenda.
Yeah, I mean, again, for me, we could even change it to no time may the superintendent require any less face coverings than may be required by law. I mean, that could work as well, but yeah, I
It
don't
seems
know.
like there's a lot here, where it's a lot of run-ons, so I think we have to figure out a way to
Just get rid of it.
lower it down.
and the only other thing I have on the agenda was there was an email that was sent to the board a couple of weeks ago asking about the conflict of interest policy, basically saying, can you limit who's allowed to be a board member?
Yeah.
And that's in Ohio Revised Code, who
Right.
can and can't run for board. And then there is the Attorney General's conflict of interest code of ethics that any board member would have to follow. That would say, if you are in a position where you are related to an employee, here's when you have to excuse yourself, here's where you can't vote, here's where you can vote. And if there's any impropriety there, then that goes to the Dave Yost, he will investigate that, but the board is not allowed to say who can and can't run for public office.
Yes.
That's
That was
in Ohio Revised Code.
And, it was a case where, I got an email about that, I called him and talked him through it, he understands.
Okay. So, I believe that's what we got for today. So I appreciate you guys coming back out, back-to-back Fridays.
Thank you.
I know I'm not as entertaining as Norm is, but
Well,
we got
can
through
try.
it.
So,
So,
Captain?
yeah, no, I have no maritime experiences. So then, at the board meeting at the end of the month, then the ones that we did with Norm last week will be up for first read. It'll be, I think we sent 9 forward, and then these 3 will be up for second read. And then, as of right now, I don't have anything that was presented to me for next month's meeting. And if we kind of follow our script, we got, if it comes in the next week and a half or so, then we probably won't have one for April.
And you'll get that timeline out to the entire board, so they're
Yes.
aware of it, so they
Yep.
know if they
Yeah,
get
because I believe that's
something
one
in.
thing we talked about was
Yeah.
kind of having further communication after these meetings, so everyone knows, and I'll slap that in there and send it to them, say this is kind of the timeline which we prefer to operate, of course, unless there's a extenuating circumstance where time is of the essence.
And that doesn't mean every policy for everyone.
Correct. So, I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.